Good afternoon, everyone. Good morning, wherever you may be dialing in from. You're very welcome to our SmartBear webinar today, coming to you live from our Galway office in a very wet and windy west of Ireland, where Dermot and I are based. My name is Aaron Fox. I'm with my colleague here, Dermot Caniff, and we are both technical engineers here at SmartBear Software in Galway, and we'll be taking you through the webinar and its contents over the course of the next hour. So Dermot, good afternoon.
Good afternoon, Aaron. How are you?
Good, thank you. How was your lunch? Did you have a good lunch?
I had a satisfying, if slightly brief, lunch. How about you?
Yeah, but I was happy with it. I had a nice cup of tea and a nice sandwich.
Excellent.
So, guys, before we actually go any further, as I said, we've a large attendance today, which is fantastic. It's great to see. Can we just maybe hear where everyone is dialing in from today?
We've got people from Austria and South Africa and Denmark, some UK members.
London, Netherlands, Sweden, India, all over. We're gone global.
Fantastic.
Fantastic, guys. People from all over the world. That's really cool. That's really cool. So, guys, just before we kick off as well, can I just ask for some simple housekeeping rules? So, firstly, any questions related to the webinar you have, any questions you want to ask us, please put that in the Q&A box. Anything else, feel free to put in the chat. We will be kicking off some polls throughout the course of the webinar, and we'd be very grateful if you could just take a few moments to answer those. It gives us valuable feedback, which allows us to really shape and form our webinars going forward. Okay, this session is also recorded, so for those of you that registered, whether you are able to be here with us today or not, you'll receive a recording of this in your mailbox around this time tomorrow. Okay? So what I'm going to do, Dermot, is let's kick this off, and I'm going to start by, I'm going to share my screen here, and let's kick this off.
Awesome.
Okay, guys? So Dermot, our topic today, something that really excites you and I as Selenium heads, making sense of Selenium, when to use it and when not to use it.
Absolutely.
So what's our objectives for today? What do we want to achieve with this webinar? What do we want to come away from today with? We want to know how to maximize the value from open source testing frameworks, because Dermot, to be fair, we can talk about paid frameworks and tools, but there's a lot of really, really good open source tools there.
Oh, there's a huge wealth of them, and you know they can add significant value to your project if used correctly.
Oh, for sure. And Selenium, being one of these, which we are going to focus on today. We're going to look at the key differences between open source tools and commercial tools. So we're going to look at the differences, for example, between Selenium and our test left tool, which does have a lot of similarities, but also some big differences as well. And then we're actually going to look at some demonstrations and examples where we work from a Selenium perspective and then a test left perspective as well.
Brilliant.
So guys, you've seen us on camera, but today you're with myself, Aaron Fox, and Dermot Caniff, technical engineers here at SmartBear, and we specialize in the UI testing tools here at SmartBear. So Dermot, what is Selenium? I think you really would be the Selenium guru amongst us this morning. Well, that's the term I'm going to put on you, so no pressure. So in a nutshell, what is Selenium for maybe users out there or listeners who haven't used this before or who might have heard the term?
Mm-hmm. Well, Selenium it's a framework which allows you to interact with web applications, and it creates a variety of methods that you can use to access individual objects within your DOM, which is the document object model. Okay, so Selenium basically exposes areas of your web application and makes them accessible to whatever coding or framework that you're using, so that you can actually perform interactions like clicks or mouse overs or scroll tos, or you can enter text. And Selenium just exposes those as programmatic controls that you can access.
Okay, so in layman's terms, would you say it's a script builder to allow us to perform actions on our UI through scripts?
Exactly, it's a toolkit for that. Yeah.
Okay, fantastic. So guys, quick question. How many of you guys are either using Selenium or it's part of your day-to-day jobs, or it's part of your toolkit? We'd be very interested to know.
In fact, we have a poll question which covers just that topic.
Yeah, let's ask.
Can I fire it up? Here we go. Now, okay. So we'll just let that poll run. Oh, we've got a few answers in already. And considering there's about over 100 attendees at this point, we might need to let that run. But it's actually filling up quite quickly now.
Yeah, really good participation. Thanks very much, guys.
Thanks.
I just see there as well, guys, there's a lot of people using the raise hand function. We can't really interact with you via raised hand or anything like that. We can see the hand being raised. So can we just ask you that, any questions again you have, can you put them in the Q&A? Or any questions that we may ask, and can you answer in the chat as well, or in any of the polls. So Dermot, there seems to be I would describe a fairly even horse race going on here. There's not many between them. Maybe a head or a hair between. Yes, I am a Selenium user frequently. Mm-hmm. I'm just getting started, but I'm not a Selenium user. I'm thinking about it. So I think we have 27% of you guys are using Selenium frequently. 31% are just getting started with the tool, and 36% are currently not using it but are thinking of using it. So, and then we have 5% who would be using it on a very regular basis and would be at an expert level in it, which is fantastic. So really a diverse audience this morning, and for all you guys out there, we're looking to further educate you guys and inform you guys, those that are using it, and those of you that are thinking of using it, or it's something that you might find useful. We're hoping that we can get you off the ground as well with some good ideas going forward.
Exactly, yes.
Okay, so I think we'll close this poll, Dermot.
Okay.
And we'll move on. Okay.
Great.
So let's move on here. So are we currently using Selenium? So we jumped the gun a small bit, but we answered that through the poll. So Dermot, the benefits of Selenium. So when we talk about Selenium, straight away the first thing that comes to mind is open source. Selenium is a free open source tool that can be downloaded and used by anybody.
That's exactly correct. And not only Selenium as a toolkit, but they also have the Selenium IDE, which allows you to explore some of these descriptors and some of these identifiers that you can use in Selenium. So
exactly.
Free open source software.
And a question actually, for you, Dermot, and we can use this on Windows, Mac, Linux, all these different machines?
Absolutely. It's cross-browser technology.
Fantastic. And that feeds into our next point. It is multi-platform, as you said. It is cross-browser. Chrome, Firefox, Safari, whatever browser you so wish. We can use it there. Mm-hmm. And it is multi-language and framework as well. So for guys like ourselves who would have written Selenium code, I would prefer to write my Selenium in Python. But, you can also write it in several other languages, such as JavaScript and Ruby, Perl, Groovy, so on.
Absolutely. I myself have used Java quite extensively, and also Ruby using Capybara as an intermediary layer.
Fantastic. And would you say that there's any preferred language, or really just whatever suits your needs at the time, or what you're not most knowledgeable in?
It seems to be, whatever you happen to be working in your existing software stack. So, for example, my last interaction directly with Selenium, we were using Java throughout. So it just made sense to continue building with Java.
Yeah, but it doesn't really matter at the end of the day. You're not going to lose or gain regardless what language you build it in at the end of the day.
Exactly. It's a cost, I suppose, a benefit analysis that you have to make based on your own use.
Exactly. And then we can talk about the reusability and integrations of Selenium. So I think, Dermot, one of the great things with Selenium, and even here at SmartBear, we understand Selenium is so heavily used in industry, and particularly with web testing. Mm-hmm. So, for example, with our front-end tools, we ensure and we put a high priority on the fact that they do work with Selenium. They really work side by side with Selenium. And I think a lot of other tools in industry work with Selenium as well. For example, I've used the Selenium IDE, as have you, but I've also written Selenium through Eclipse, and I've also written it in Visual Studio. So you can really use Selenium across a huge variety of tools. And I would actually go as far as saying it's probably very, very unlikely that the tool stack you're using would not have Selenium support.
Again, it depends on your usage, and so yeah, the interactions and the reusability that you build in is entirely dependent on your own project. So
yeah, exactly. But like every tool, paid or open source, there is also drawbacks of Selenium. So when we talk about the drawbacks, I suppose, from my perspective, of the four we see here, the biggest one for me would be the lack of support. So with open source tools, you don't have that dedicated support team. You are reliant on the open source community, which does have some fantastic people and developers on there who've done some fantastic things with technology and software. But you are reliant on the community to help you out should you encounter a bug or a roadblock. Which can take time. There's no real framework there or process which allows you to get your support, quickly or so on.
Mm-hmm. And the great thing about open source is that there's just so much information out there. But also a drawback of the open source community is that there's just so much information out there. So if you go searching for the information, it's very easy for the one piece of information that you want to get drowned out by all the other information. So that can be complex. You may be lucky enough to have a domain expert in your team, or you may not, in which case, that route becomes a lot more complex.
Exactly. And if we remember back to our university days, neither you or I are too long gone from university, but remember we get a project and you would type into Google how to do this method and you would get 5 million bazillion answers on how to do the exact same thing. And technically they're probably all right, but you've no idea what to use in what context. And I think when we talk about Selenium, there's so much support out there, even though, on that community that, as you said, you can lose the run yourself, what you're actually looking for a lot of the time.
Absolutely.
Another thing with Selenium is the lack of an object repository. So there's no object repository available to help you, quickly build up stable tests.
Mm-hmm. In my own experience, again, working in that Java project I mentioned, we had to create our object repository from scratch, and that took considerable time. We're talking months in order to completely map the entire product that we wanted to test, and that was challenging. The other thing was that, if we were maintaining a map of an ever-changing object, that became complex and an ongoing maintenance task. So Selenium doesn't do that automatically. It doesn't build your object repository automatically. So that is a concern when you're implementing Bear's Selenium.
Exactly. And if you're dealing with, testing, which is fairly in-depth and complex, that model can in turn be very in-depth and complex. And I've been on projects in previous roles as well, where you would almost have dedicated individuals who would run and maintain that model. And that would be their sole purpose day to day, even teams of people that would be in charge of that. So it's very time consuming and it's very resource heavy as well.
Absolutely, yeah.
Selenium can also, in some instances, be difficult to scale. And this goes back to what we were just talking about. What if you do an upgrade to your website? The upgrade looks fantastic, the customers love it, but behind it, you're after really, putting serious pressure on your developers who have to update that model. There could be considerable weeks and hundreds of hours of work in trying to upgrade the model to reflect the new changes.
Exactly.
So it can be difficult, to scale in that regard.
Mm-hmm. And if you're maintaining a model, then you have to plan to scale the model, and scaling the model has a certain amount of overhead in effort as well. So, you have to think, 2 or 3 steps ahead when you're dealing with Selenium, because if you don't plan to scale your model, then you end up with brittle tests and brittle code. So.
Exactly. And the last thing you want is a faulty model, because, that can take a very, very long time to iron out.
Exactly. Yeah.
And then finally, no record and replay. And I think more and more, as this is becoming a bigger question, record and replay. More and more tools are coming on the market which offer a codeless ability to record and replay scripts. And I think that where Selenium really would fall down in this regard is its lack of record and replay. I think to use Selenium, you do need to, in my opinion, have at least a degree of scripting knowledge or developer experience, where with a lot of these new tools, CrossBrowser being one of them, our own UI functional test tool here at SmartBear, you don't have to have any coding experience to use the tool. And there's other tools like that as well. And I think that's really where, Selenium, it's not that intuitive or user-friendly to those who would not have that technical experience.
Exactly, yes. It's quite a steep learning curve. If you choose Selenium as the underlying technology for testing, then there's an awful lot that you have to learn very quickly.
Exactly. So when does Selenium make sense? So just before we move on to the next topic, okay, or the next piece of this, we have 3 questions here. Let's answer these questions. So the first one from Jitesh, and I apologize if my pronunciation of some of your names are slightly off. Is it possible to do automation of a Windows app using Selenium?
So Selenium is primarily aimed at web applications.
Yeah. So the application would really have to be on the web, really, to get the proper use out of Selenium. Question number 2 from Norbert. Is it possible now to run Selenium ID scripts on different browsers, like IE, Safari, and Chrome? Absolutely. Selenium is cross-browser.
Absolutely. And the IDE will run on any browser as well as the tests. So.
Okay. And the final question from Ankit. I've set up a Jenkins job in which my Selenium tests run. The problem is flakiness. And I actually love that word, flakiness. When I hear someone say flakiness or brittle, I know they know what they're talking about.
Exactly. Yes.
The same tests run fine on a local machine, but some of these tests fail on running the Jenkins job. I've used Java. What should I have done in this case? I don't think there's any right or wrong answer there, Dermot.
No, it's probably very specific to the instance itself. Yeah, that's the sort of thing that you'd need to get a pair of eyes on and just kind of work through.
Yeah, I think that's a very specific sort of issue.
Exactly. Yes.
Mm-hmm. So we'll jump back into more questions later on, but for now, let's keep moving ahead. So when does Selenium not make sense? So when we talk about Selenium not making sense, we talk about a lot of the time speed. So speed and quality. So when we talk about speed, as we mentioned, it can take significant amounts of time to get those object models up and going. Script maintenance can take time. Even creating the scripts in the first place can take a lot of time.
Exactly. As we mentioned, the learning curve at the start and the time taken to specify your model, that's all going to take time in your project, and it's time you have to budget for.
Exactly. And then again, with the test coverage, when we talk about test coverage, when we're testing web, it's not good enough anymore, to put it quite bluntly, to just use Chrome because it's so well used and assume all your customers will use Chrome and assume that just because it works on Chrome, it works fine on everything else. So you need to expand your test coverage. You need to really, if you have a website that's out on a public domain, it needs to work on all the browsers. It needs to work on all the mobile browsers. It needs to work on all the mobile devices.
Absolutely, yes. So coverage is definitely it's a concern when you're planning out your Selenium-based approach. So
exactly, and even between one Selenium test and another, you might have to make some small changes to your script here and there depending on the platform you want to test it on. Mm-hmm. So sometimes one script doesn't fit all. You might have to actually have a bit of duplication there with some very small minor changes, and they all need to be accounted for as well, and that can take time, and it's probably not the most efficient way of doing it either.
Indeed, and it's maintenance overhead, and again, you start to become brittle when you're updating many different instances of the same thing.
Exactly. And finally, again, the extendability. One thing, from my development experience, one thing I always used to hate doing was when I would have something, a piece of code or a method that functions fine, and I'd be asked to extend it, add new functionality in there. Because straight away you're thinking, if I add this new piece of code, what gets affected? Do I break something? What sort of integrations do I have to consider? So when you're trying to extend it out, I think, you do leave yourself vulnerable, if again, not planned and prepared properly to encounter some issues there.
Absolutely.
And this kind of ties us in, Dermot, to the whole new methodology around kind of software development. So we kind of traditional waterfall method, a lot of companies, a lot of teams are moving away from that into more an agile process. And then even from that, people are trying to move into the DevOps world as well. And when we really talk about, traditional waterfall, we design and document everything. And once we've that done, we lock it in. It doesn't change. We close the door. We lock it. We move into build. We develop and we build everything. And it's just assumed more or less that when it's built, it's built, and it's going to work because it's built to requirements. Okay. Then we're going to close off that section. We're going to test, and then we're finally going to implement. So it is a very linear. Can you give me the word?
Linear.
Linear. Thank you. It is a very linear type approach. It's quite one-dimensional in a way. It makes the assumptions that every section is going to be 100% completed with no issues, which, as we know, with software development is
almost never.
You have more chance of winning the lotto, I think.
Yeah, probably.
And that kind of led into the whole agile process, where we bundle all these different parts together, and we work in iterations and sprints.
So your deliveries are more intermediate, and you're delivering more often, and you're delivering smaller chunks of code, but you're returning what the customer would like, with the option of refinement over a shorter period of time.
Exactly. So if we're doing 2-week sprints and something doesn't work out, you're only a couple of days away from being able to readdress the whole situation again, which is really, really handy. And I suppose right now, Dermot, would be a good time, and maybe we have a poll suitable to this. But now would be a good time because if you could just post in the chat box there, what methodologies are you currently using? Are you still in the waterfall method, or have you moved into Agile, or have you taken the deep dive and you're at the cutting edge of it all with DevOps?
Yeah, it'd be interesting to hear what our attendees are practicing. Okay, we've got a few responses in. Yeah, we're seeing a lot of Agile cropping up, and certainly it does seem to be kind of expanding in usage.
Yeah, for sure. I really do think that Agile has taken off. I think it is the cornerstone methodology that's being used now, and with and DevOps is really coming on hard as well. So the vast majority are going there into Agile. Thanks, guys. And then that leads us on to DevOps. And, when we talk about DevOps, then we're talking about just the continuous integration, the continuous deployment, the continuous development. And in similar ways to Agile, where everything is just continuously rolling over, it's about releasing quicker. It's about, keeping as much uptime as we possibly can as well.
Absolutely. And it closely maps all of our intermediate and rapid deliveries that we were hoping for in Agile, because once we came, butting our heads against maybe the release structure that we had for Waterfall, where everything was kind of done at the end or done at the integration stage, it started to require a different approach in terms of, the systems that we employ for releasing and for integrating and for testing. So.
Exactly. And I think, it really is something that, it's still evolving. I think, as we've often spoken about here, a lot of people say they're using DevOps, and, in many ways they are, but to someone else they might not be. So it really is an ever evolving area. Everyone has their own take on it. There's no really right or wrong way to do it.
Exactly.
So automated test creation. Okay. So when we talk about automating tests, and I think this is really the holy grail of where testing is, it's about automating as much as possible, taking the work out of the manual labor and the manual repetition out as much as possible. It saves money, it saves effort, and it just expedites the entire process. So how would we go about doing this or setting this up? So the first thing is setup. Okay, we need a plan. We need a definitive plan about how we're going to set up our automated framework. You know, what sort of technologies are we going to use? What sort of scripting languages are we going to use? You know, what sort of testing are we going to do? Okay, all these are considerations which need to be taken into account. And in many ways as well, they are overhead. I think, for example, it's probably better to overplan than underplan.
Definitely. It's, you know, you try and specify, you try to capture as much of the pitfalls that you might envisage as possible up front. Obviously, you know, as you come to them, you adapt, and that's Agile. But, you know, trying to make your life easier over time is something, it's somewhat of an art form. So you try and think of these things when you're undertaking a shift left automation process.
Yeah, exactly. And as we kind of see from the whiteboard illustration there, and I think every development team will have a whiteboard that looks similar to this. You know, when you're talking about setup, you're talking what are you going to use, how are you going to do it? When we've decided on that, we want to start creating our tests. So, you know, for example, we want to build an object model. You know, we want to maybe have a tool such as a UI spy, which is the test left tool we will show later on, you know, which can actually help us really quickly build these models. Mm-hmm. You know, when we have the model built and we start running tests, we want to be able to maybe do some analysis. So we talk about analysis, we want reports, we want information, we want we want snapshots. And then when we have that done, we need to talk about going forward, how we maintain it. Because, you know, if you have a website, for example, that's going to be updated. You know, that's going to change every so often. That could have weekly or even quarterly releases. You know, so how do you maintain your test cases and keep them in cadence with that? You know, how do you make them more scalable, but at the same time less brittle? The longevity of your test case.
Absolutely. Because
the last thing you want, Dermot, is to come to a stage where you realize that we can no longer maintain this test case, and you have to start from scratch, and we just don't want to even go there. And then finally, you know, deploy. How are you going to deploy this? You know, do you have a pipeline? You know, you're going to use Jenkins or VSTS, or, you know, how are you going to deploy it and integrate it?
Exactly. So I suppose really kind of the best way to demonstrate how we can create these tests, I suppose, is to actually just kind of go through an example.
Exactly. And we are going to get there in a number of moments. Mm-hmm. Actually, we're going to get there right now, Dermot. So just before we actually do a test left versus Selenium demonstration, which should take about 10 minutes, we do have some questions coming in. So let's take a time out for 1 minute and just answer some of these questions. So from Zoran, is it applicable to mobile apps testing? I actually don't know this one, Dermot, so you might have to help me out here.
It can be applied, as far as I know, to mobile browser testing, but mobile apps is a different matter. So again, similar to the desktop apps, Selenium is geared more towards web.
Fantastic. I thought so myself, actually. So, you know, native mobile apps. Mm-hmm. No. From Pierre, guys, doesn't Selenium ID have a record and replay function? I believe the Selenium are trying to move towards that, and I think they may have released some newer versions which does have a degree of record and replay.
Well, they actually had a somewhat limited record replay functionality in an older version, but the newer versions have rolled back on that. I think what they're trying to do is kind of implement a more comprehensive solution, but at the moment it's not there.
Okay. From Viek, can we check if an image is fully loaded on the UI with Selenium?
Yes. So you can wait. And this, it's a very good question, because this obviously comes in useful when you're looking at Angular apps or you know, controls on your screen that are dependent on Ajax and don't appear until you perform a particular object. You can wait for those to appear, and wait time is built. It's possible with Selenium, and whether you do it with your framework or whether you do it with Selenium, that's, you know, a development decision at the point when you're actually implementing it. But if you do a Google search for Selenium wait time, you'll probably find what you're looking for. Fantastic.
So we're just going to hit 3 more questions here, and we will move on. We don't want to miss anything today. From Raghu, is Selenium supports Angular JS web pages? Yes, it does, as far as I'm aware.
So yes,
Yeah.
absolutely, it does.
And from Giles or Gills, my apologies. Are all test scripts implemented in Selenium IDE version 2.9 compatible with the newest version of Selenium 0.3? So can we take older scripts and use them in the newer IDEs? I'm not actually sure about that one.
I'm not certain myself.
But we can definitely get into it. So guys, just to make you aware, we do have all your guys' emails addresses. So if there's anything that's specific to us here in SmartBear that you want to need to work with you, we can reach out to you afterwards.
Mm-hmm. Now, I've just done some research there on Selenium IDE's record and playback. It currently implements a very basic form of record and playback, and it uses IDs. But the problem with IDs is that that can cause issues when you're trying to reference objects that use dynamic IDs.
Okay.
So if you've got dynamic objects that are being generated at load time, and your automation, your record and playback is based on an ID that is no longer there, then you're going to run into problems.
Fantastic. So hitting the answers up on the fly, Dermot.
Exactly. We want to present the best information to our subscribers as much as possible.
Okay, so let's hit this. Test left versus Selenium demonstration. So what I propose we do is let's look at a Selenium script first. Mm-hmm. Okay, and then we'll look at the test left equivalent.
Great.
Okay. So I'm just going to close my presentation here for a moment. And what you see on my screen here, this is Visual Codes. This is the free editor that we can get with Visual Studio Code. And in here, I just have a Selenium script. And this Selenium script, it just allows me to hit a website, which is this website right here, and perform login actions. Okay. Now, the website that we are using, I'm just going to give people a visual, just to give them an idea, is this one right here. So this Selenium script essentially will visit this website and it will input the username and password here and log us into this website. Okay. So just for an example, so the username here is tester and the password is test, for example, and I log in. Okay. So as we can see, this is just replicating that. So the username here of tester and the password of test, and then we're just clicking the login button. Now, we do have a lot of edited out code here. So for example, we're finding the elements here by the element ID or by its name. But here we can also see we could actually be finding elements by the XPath as well. Okay. What does that look like? So I'm just using Firefox here. But if I was to right click on anything here, so I have Selenium set up here with this browser, I can look for objects by their XPath and it will give me objects. I can look for it in Python here or C#, or I can even just jump right into the Selenium builder. So that's really, guys, how I've built out this script. Okay. But as you can see, for example, if I wanted to use XPaths here, which we're not going to use in this example, I would have to individually go into each of these elements here, right click individually, and I'd have to actually pull out each individual XPath. And that can be quite time consuming, depending on how complicated or how big your test case needs to be. For example, if you have an orders form, what's on a typical orders form? You have the name, you have addresses, you probably have between 15 to 20 input boxes, I would say. So that's 15 to 20 clicks you have to do, 15 to 20 XPaths you have to manually extract, put in, and configure accordingly.
Time consuming.
So that can be quite time consuming. Mm-hmm. Okay. So for those people that are using Selenium, they'll definitely relate to this. They'll understand exactly what we're talking about. So how do we shorten this up? Well, here at SmartBear, we came up with a great idea of let's automate all of this using a tool called Test Left.
We're mad for automation in this place.
First question we always ask, can it be automated? Mm-hmm. Okay, so when we talk about Test Left, what is Test Left, Dermot? So in a nutshell, what's Test Left?
Well, Test Left is an interface to the object recognition engine that we also use in TestComplete. And it allows you to use this object recognition engine within the IDE of your choice. So that could be Visual Studio, or it could be Eclipse, or it could be IntelliJ. And what it allows you to do is to interact with the application that you're intending to test, and very quickly and very simply import identifiers for the object model of your application into your IDE's tests.
So it really builds the code for you.
Pretty much, yes. I mean, it's all presented there. There's no expansive search. There's no expansive discovery of different aspects of your DOM. It's all there. You don't have to go clicking quite so much the same way that you would have if you were having to do this manually.
Exactly. Let's look at an example of that right now. So typically when we use test left, what we can actually do is we can build up an object model very, very quickly. So guys, if we can just come back here to this orders website, for example, right? And for example, here's an example of a form where there'll be several, we have to do several clicks, several expats. This can take time. What happens if I want to automatically generate all this with test left? How would I do it? Okay. So test left is it's an individual tool we offer here at SmartBear. It's installed and licensed individually, and it can be accessed directly through an IDE as it plugs in, and we'll see in a moment. But it can also be accessed through your desktop with the test left UI spy. And when we open it up, this is really all it is. It's a very simple interface. Nothing to be afraid of, nothing to be overwhelmed by. It's very, very simple. And what we want to do here is we want to take the object recognition engine of CrossBrowser. This is kind of, you ever watch Top Gear and they say the new Lamborghini that has taken the old Lamborghini engine and just made it better? It's kind of like this.
Okay.
Kind of like this. So what we're doing here is we've taken the object spy, and all I'm doing here, Dermot, is I'm just moving around the screen. And you can see with the red highlighter here, it's picking up all the individual objects. Okay, so it's doing it for me. Okay, if I was to drop it here, what's it going to do? It's going to give me 3 boxes. It's going to give me a screenshot just for my own sanity to know I'm looking at what I dropped it on. I know I'm looking at the right thing. It's going to give me all of the methods and properties of it right here. And over here, it's going to show me where it's actually finding it. So it gives me the entire object tree of where it's actually located, and it's located right here. Okay?
Outstanding.
And what I can do then is I can come in here to my cog and I can specify, do I want this to be outputted in any of these languages? I can specify, the type of, do I want it to be like a driver method to interact with this object, or do I want to interact with the process that created it, or do I want to interact with the main page itself? So I'm just going, let's just leave it at C#. Okay. And then I can just simply come up here and I can go copy identification. And if I come down here now into Notepad and I paste this in, voila. This is all the identification code you will need to interact with that object.
Excellent.
Okay, so test left has done this all for me. So for example, it's set up exactly, how I'm going to interact with it via this browser. It's going to reference the website. It's going to give me all of the identifiers it can use. And this is also editable. I can come in here, and if I know there's additional identifiers, I can come in here and I can just go another identifier. Okay, and so on. The really cool thing about it is, people are probably thinking now, Dermot, well, I'm going to have to do this for every single object now. So why is it that different to Selenium?
That's a fair point.
Why don't we, or what happens if we had a situation where we could actually do this all in one go? We could take every object on the page and do it all together. So if I come up here, scroll up to the overall web page here, you'll see by clicking on that, it now gives me the option to copy the model. So I'm going to click on copy model here, come back into Notepad and paste in it. And now look, it's giving me the model of every single object which exists on that page very, very quickly. So we can take them individually, or we can hit it at a page level, and we can get all of the objects for the page. So in 2 clicks of mouse, we've generated an entire object model for this web page. A neat trick is if I had all of the web pages of this application opened up, I can copy every single web page all at one time as well if I so wish. Okay. So if I opened up, for example, the login page alongside this and I perform this action, it would take this orders page and it would also take the login page. So we can very, very quickly build up our model with test left.
So you can just automatically generate like a domain specific language for your application.
Exactly. Absolutely. You know, and that's the great power of test left. And you know, when you develop your script in test left, you can really do whatever you so wish then. You know, you can use it with our own tools, CrossBrowser Testing, CrossComplete. You can run it off Jenkins, VSTS. You know, you can run it off Windows command line. It's a script like any other script out there. It's not written in its own specific language or anything. It's written in the language of your choice. It's really, you can really do whatever you so wish with it.
Brilliant.
And just very briefly, you know, I have in my Visual Studio here, I have one of these fleshed out. So again, this is a test left script. You will see that, you know, it is in some ways quite similar to Selenium. Now this is done with a BBD framework, which is SpecFlow and Gherkin. And we're not going to touch on that today.
Not in depth anyway. Not
in depth, but you know, so for example, we can come in here and you know, we can see here's the model. Now this model has been cleaned up by one of our developers. So we can see this is the entire object model. This is the same website. This is the entire object model. So if we come up here, for example, here is the, you know, for the username and password on the home page. If we scroll down just to show people the entire model actually is here. Mm-hmm. Let's scroll down. Here is where you would put in your zip code on the orders page, 3 pages deep. Mm-hmm. So it's all here. Excellent. And we can just, for example, if I go back here to my test here, all we're doing up here is we are just importing it in. So here's the orders model. And we're just importing it in and we can just reference back and over. Okay.
So you've very quickly, with just a few clicks of your mouse, created an entire toolchain for interacting with your application.
Exactly. Absolutely. And you know, this helps with your scalability and extendability as well. If you make an update, just go back into test left, point at your object spy at the new piece of the new element or object and just map it straight into your model. Mm-hmm. Very, very quick, very, very simple.
Absolutely.
Okay. And again, you know, we have support teams dedicated to this as well here. So this is a commercialized tool. You can download free trials of this from our website. And we do have a support team with it as well.
Brilliant.
Okay.
Just before we go on, I just want to reiterate for our audience, if you have questions, the best place to raise that is in the QA panel. Okay. It's difficult to answer questions in the chat because they quite often scroll out of the way quite quickly. And it's difficult also to interact with people who've raised their hands. So the best place is to go to the QA panel and we'll do our best to answer all the questions that come through there.
Cheers, guys. Thank you. Okay. So we need to just go back to the, okay. So we've seen our demonstration, guys. I hope you found it of benefit, and I hope we portrayed to you the advantages of both, you know, of both tools, but in particular test left. So let's pause, Dermot, for a moment for some questions. I see the question box is populating up here. Guys, we apologize if we don't get to everyone's question. There is a lot of questions coming in today, and we are conscious of time. So we are just really just picking questions out which we feel are most you know, relevant to the broader audience.
Obviously, with over 120 participants, it's going to be a challenge to answer every question that comes through. But as Aaron said earlier, we have all of your contact details. So whatever questions are raised, we will try our best to get back to you with an adequate answer.
So just some questions here. Ramya, is TestLeft a licensed tool? TestLeft is a licensed tool. You can get it on a free trial from our website, but it is a fully licensed tool and an individual product. In terms of licensing, costings, and all the nitty-gritties, it's all there available freely on our website. Mm-hmm. Can you kindly repeat the copy model using the object model? So again, we are quite time constrained today, but please be aware that you can get all of the information on TestLeft on the website. We have also done other webinars of Test Left, which you can get on the SmartBear website, or you can also actually found them on posted on the SmartBear channel on YouTube as well. So there is an abundance of information and videos and instructions on Test Left freely available on our support portal, but also a lot of video material out there as well.
And this particular video as well will be made available after the webinar, and you can rewatch it. So that if you need to recap on anything, you have that resource as well.
Is it possible to automate actions such as saving a file and choosing the saved location in the IE browser with Selenium?
So Selenium allows you to interact with browser controls like the menu. So you should be able to go into, say, the file menu and select save, and then interacting with file save dialogues. I haven't done this with IE myself, but as far as I know, that should be possible. Alternatively, if you are scraping information from your screen, you can programmatically output that information from within whatever framework, scripted framework you're using.
I think it all depends on your scripting ability. If you can logically script it, you can achieve it.
Exactly.
Okay, so we will pause on the questions for a moment, Dermot, and we will move on. Okay. Mm-hmm. So how does Test Left help with speed and quality? Okay. So looking more at Test Left now as opposed to Selenium. As we've seen, it's an easy and quick test creation. Very, quick test creation. It's all prepackaged properties and methods that are ready for use. We've seen when we use the object spy, we can very simply fire up everything we need. It's there. It's ready, accessible to us. Mm-hmm. You can use it offline. So even if you don't have an internet connection, it's saved on your it's on your local machine. So you can use it when and how you like.
Mm-hmm. Exactly.
In terms of refactoring, because we can so quickly, just change properties and models, the refactoring process, it's easier and it's faster. There's no back and forth between documentation, which is, I think, actually hugely beneficial.
Definitely.
And with the detailed log files and screenshots and usage metrics as well, it does actually give us a lot of information when we run tests.
Yeah, and it's that runtime visibility that kind of really enhances the execution of your tests.
So, my 3 favorite things in Test Left. So, as you know, Test Left is probably my favorite tool of the whole stack.
I knew, yes.
Yeah, from a personal, I know I talk about it a lot, but so create your tests faster in the IDE. So we've seen how quickly that we can create our tests, how we can very quickly with 2 or 3 clicks build an entire object model and save it in a singular file. Mm-hmm. Okay, that's I think that speaks for itself, really. It's incredibly powerful. It's effective. It's accurate. It's very efficient.
Yep.
And it works.
And if that was all it did, it would already be adding value.
Accelerate your shift left movement with behavior-driven development. So again, we touched very briefly on behavior-driven development and this whole shift left or testing earlier. Test left works extremely well with your BDD frameworks, Gherkin syntax, Cucumber spec flow, mm-hmm. And lots more. It works in all the IDs that your developers are going to be using. Mm-hmm. And the great thing is it's very much a take it or leave it sort of thing. You can use Test Left standalone on its own 100% effectively. Mm-hmm. But if you want to bring it into a behavior-driven development environment, it's set up, it's ready to go for you there as well. Mm-hmm. And the great thing with behavior-driven development is it brings everyone together. It allows people who would not be that technical or would not be, at the same technical level of knowledge or I suppose jargon as a developer or tester to understand the test cases in very basic English. And, they can be used then to generate and in accordance with Test Left, really good solid scripts. Mm-hmm. And then finally, test early, test often. with your DevOps ecosystem. So I love test left, you love DevOps. So this is match made in heaven for us right here. I think it really complements a DevOps type of structure.
Well, absolutely. I mean, with DevOps, you know, you're talking about building in test packages as rapidly as possible, you know, to match your release. So something that shortens the amount of time it takes to build up one of those testing packages, that's obviously going to be a win for DevOps.
Exactly. So are you interested in learning more about Selenium alternatives?
Mm-hmm. Well, we had a poll.
I think we've a poll, yeah.
I think we've established that a lot of people are very interested in learning more.
So, okay. So what were the results of the poll? Can we bring them up?
Yeah. Okay, so it seems that 56% of you would like to learn more about faster Selenium alternative, and 56% also, matching, are also interested in learning more about how you can maximize your Selenium scripts with commercial tools. So that's a very interesting statistic that we can move forward with.
We have a tie.
Exactly. It may be the same people. There may be overlap. We're not certain of that at this point, but whether or which, we will certainly be able to furnish a lot of you with the information that you require.
Exactly. Okay, so that's really interesting to know. So SmartBear Solutions and Selenium. Okay. Mm-hmm. So Selenium is our friend here at SmartBear. We like to work with it. Our tools like to work with it, and we do put a heavy emphasis on the integration of it. Okay, so one of the great things here is, you know, we don't want to move people away from what they're already using. You know, we actually are quite happy to integrate what you have to allow you to use our tools with minimum disruption to your own environment and infrastructure. Okay, so if we work kind of down from top to bottom with this slide, so, you know, from an API side, you have Swagger Hub. We can design and define and develop API specifications there. Mm-hmm. We also have open source Swagger, which achieves the same. And then from a collaborator perspective, you know, we can actually review and, you know, do code reviews and audits on this code that we write in a build phase. Yeah. We can, if we follow the arrow, we can kind of work around into, you know, talk about the whole area of continuous integration, continuous deployment.
Absolutely.
We can, with our continuous integration, change the point why we're continually building, we're also continually testing. So Selenium is fully integrated with Test Complete, for example, which is our codeless record and replay functional UI tool. Mm-hmm. It's fully integrated with SOAP UI, which is our functional testing tool for our APIs. And then we can bring it all together, for example, with QAComplete, which is our test management tool for planning, scheduling, testing, and defect tracking.
Absolutely. And
then all of them as well are, you know, the vast majority of people out there use Jira or TFS or a defect tracking tool like that. Mm-hmm. Again, like Selenium, we have a lot of love for Jira. We put a heavy, we put heavy emphasis on that integration. So any defects that arise from that, we can do that with Jira. Then we have Alertsite. Again, I actually really like Alertsite. You probably hear me talk about Alertsite a lot too, for monitoring. So, you know, when we have all these tests created and they're tested and, you know, the websites are live and the APIs are live, you know, we can set up monitors to monitor the health of them, the availability, their performance, the response times. Mm-hmm. And then on the bottom there, I almost forgot about him because he was right down the bottom, is CrossBrowser Testing, which is a fantastic platform we have where we have over 1,500 combinations of Mac, Windows, Linux, iOS, and Android applications, mobile and desktop, where you can use to test what the appearance and performance and functionality of your website's on.
Exactly.
And the great thing is, if you have a Selenium framework built up, you can just, you know, you can still use our tools, you know, with the integrations there. You can use your Selenium test cases. You can use our tools to enhance your Selenium and really bring your testing to the next level with it as well. So cross-browser testing, for example, Test Complete, SOAP UI. All these tools allow you to just actually use what you have already from a Selenium perspective.
Simple import.
So SmartBear solutions with Selenium. So Selenium is primarily used for testing.
Indeed.
But so is CrossBrowser Testing, and so is TestComplete, probably our two flagship UI testing tools. And the great thing is, for example, in CrossBrowser Testing, we have a script builder. And that script builder is primarily based on Selenium. So we can build scripts that pretty much automate 80% of our scripts in Java, C#, Ruby, JavaScript, Python, several languages. And it is already based on Selenium. So if you're a Selenium user, you're onto a winner straight away there. And then we can run these scripts across over, as I said, over 1,000 combinations of configurations to really get that test coverage we need. We mentioned earlier about websites, how you need that coverage. And then with TestComplete, we can just use them with our functional UI tests as well. And then we can obviously, as we had maintain with Alertsite.
Exactly.
And also manage the entire thing with QAComplete. And here's just a very quick example of, for example, how we import with Selenium. So from a TestComplete perspective, any of our users using that, you can integrate your existing Selenium unit test framework very simply there. Okay.
Simple and straightforward.
From a cross-browser testing perspective, again, as we said, the Selenium scripts, they can be set up with cross-browser testing. You can download the skeleton script from cross-browser testing and flesh it out with Selenium. You can add in the accessor in Selenium to your CBT account, and you can run those jobs off Jenkins, off your own command line, wherever you so wish. And then with just briefly on the running Selenium with cross-browser testing, you have that test coverage with all those configurations. Because we have all the infrastructure, you don't have to put the cost into owning it.
Exactly.
And it is very, very quick as well. It's extremely quick. We have all the Debug Nurse. There is the record and replay cross-browser testing. There is the screenshots. There's the screenshot comparisons as well.
It's a very powerful tool.
It's an extremely powerful tool. And again, it's a very easy tool. It's probably the easiest tool in our entire stack to use. You have your integrations with bug tracking systems as well there. And again, the big one, it also has mobile testing with iOS. A lot of times you will only get mobile testing with Android. It has the iOS testing as well.
Excellent.
From an Alertsite perspective, we've seen how we can set it up to monitor. Alertsite, again, has an integration which allows us to take our Selenium scripts and add them in as a monitor. So you can run that Selenium script every 5-10 minutes, 24/7, and get a report back. And then from a QAComplete perspective, which is our overall test management tool, you can have these scripts running, in QAComplete as well. And again, QAComplete, it's kind of the hierarchy or the overarching management tool of all this. You can sit this on top of pretty much anything to manage your entire testing experience. So I think, Dermot, it's the final poll of the day. And I know we're probably even got a minute or two over, but are you interested in learning more about how you can maximize your Selenium scripts with commercial tools? And I think, I think that poll has been run.
Yes. Unlike in previous webinars, we ran all the questions in one go. So I think we've answered that question. Again, we rested on the 56%. So we will absolutely endeavor to furnish everybody with the information that they want.
Fantastic. So from a content perspective, that's us today. Thoroughly enjoy this webinar. It's great to get these really good, relevant webinars where we're talking with people who are doing this every day. Really enjoyed it. We had a fantastic attendance and a lot of interesting conversation and questions. So what we'll do, we'll take one more minute just to answer a few more questions, and then, guys, we have to hop off. But just remember, this recording will be in your mailbox tomorrow. Okay, so a nice, happy Thursday present for you all.
And again, we have your contact details. So for questions where we need to get back to you, we will be able to get back to you with more in-depth information.
Okay, so I'm going to pick out 3 questions here, Dermot,
Good.
and you're going to answer them.
I'm going to answer them. Okay.
Do we use Selenium to test in? Do we use Selenium differently in browser? Okay, let me rephrase. Do we use Selenium to test different browsers in parallel? Can we use Selenium to test different browsers in parallel? That's the question.
Absolutely. So Selenium just allows you to identify aspects of your application. How you execute your test, which is based on Selenium, whether you execute it on a single machine or in parallel, is down to the framework that you're using and maybe the CI/CD tool that you're using.
Fantastic. Does TestLeft use Selenium Server during the run test? I don't believe so.
I think some of the object identification is based on Selenium under the hood, so to speak.
Yeah, I don't think it's as simple as that. I don't think it's run off pure Selenium, no. But it's something very, very similar. Mm-hmm. Okay. And the final question, who gets the lucky question? The XPath generation with TestLeft supports which XPath version?
That is a very good question.
We can get back to you on that, actually. I kind of set us up for failure there because I wasn't quite sure the answer to that myself. But we can check that out for you.
Okay.
Very good. We can check it out for you.
Absolutely. Okay.
And again, guys, for those of you that we have outstanding queries for, we do have your email addresses. We'd like to thank you very much for your participation today and joining. And we hope to see you again at webinars in the future for SmartBear. And you can get all of our available webinars at our SmartBear Academy /webinars. From myself and Dermot, have a fantastic rest of day. And we hope to speak to you again soon. Thanks, Dermot.
Have a great day.